Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everyone. So as Chris mentioned, I'm Darryl Cohen, geographer in the Population Division. Some of you may be familiar with the Census Bureau, so you might know that most of our geographers are in our Geography Division, surprise, surprise. But there are a few of us scattered around other parts of the agency, so I work in the Population Geography staff, which is a small group of geographers in the Population Division. And my topic today is mapping population data at the U.S. Census Bureau. So just to give you a quick overview of what I'll talk about this morning, first I'll provide a little bit of historical context. I'll show some maps from some of the earliest decennial censuses, followed by some more recent census population maps. And then I'll talk a little bit or show a few maps from some of our other U.S. data programs, such as our post-census population and housing unit estimates, as well as the American Community Survey, which some of you hopefully are familiar with. And then I'll move into some of our international data products and talk about some maps that we've made using data from other countries' censuses and surveys. And I'll close by showing where you can find some of our interactive map tools, and I'll give hopefully a brief demonstration of our international map viewer at the end. All right, so the Census Bureau and its predecessor agencies, the Bureau itself wasn't established till 1902, but hopefully everyone here knows that we've been conducting censuses since 1790. So there were a number of agencies that preceded the Census Bureau who conducted the earlier censuses. And mapping has been a big part of our sort of data dissemination programs since the very beginning. So if you look at the map on the left there, that is actually data from the 1790 census. That map, I believe, was published sometime later, actually after the 1880 census, but the data are from 1790. And the map on the right is 100 years later, so that's from the 1890 census, and it's clear to see how much the country changed in both its geographic extent and its population density or population distribution over that 100-year period. So if we skip ahead another 110 years, this is actually a map that's patterned after the 1891 on the previous slide there, but this is from the 2000 Census Atlas of the United States, which I hope some of you are familiar with. So it's pretty common for us to publish maps to accompany each census. This is another example. This is a county level population density map from the 1960 census. And this is one of our more popular products. This is actually a dot density map. We call this the nighttime population distribution map, although it kind of looks like a nighttime satellite photo, but it's not. It's just a dot density map, and one dot here represents 7,500 people. So this sort of is one of the maps that we've made following each decennial census for a number of decades now, I think at least going back to 1970. All right, so to use a little bit of a local example here, choropleth maps like this one of county population change from 2000 to 2010 are still very common. And this shows counties and independent cities in Virginia, and the inset there on the right shows the area around Norfolk where we are, number 25 there. And you can see its population grew a little between 2000 and 2010. So moving on from the census, this is an example of a map from our post-census, in this case, housing unit estimates. So we estimate population as well as housing units to the county level for years that don't end in zero. So this map shows percentage change in housing units by county between 2007 and 2017. All right, so this map is actually from an American Community Survey report, and this is an example of a data topic that lends itself to sort of a different map style. So in this case, we're using bar charts, and these are selected metropolitan areas. So this report that this map came from was for selected sub-Saharan African and Caribbean ancestry groups, and hopefully you can make out the legend there, but the groups which are basically the largest population groups for those regions were Ethiopian, Nigerian, Haitian, Jamaican, and Trinidadian and Tobagonian. And so the metro areas represented on this map are those that had at least 10,000 people in at least one of the selected groups for the report. And hopefully it's pretty easy to make out the Jamaican population that stands out there in the New York metro area and the Haitian population that stands out in the Miami metro area. All right, so moving on to some of our international data products. This map uses data from the 2010 Census of Brazil, and it shows the indigenous population or percent indigenous by municipality. So one of the cool things about working with international data is that sometimes it lends itself to looking at patterns that cross national boundaries. So in this case, we have the, you can see a sort of high concentration of a high percentage. In some cases, some of these areas have relatively low total population numbers, but there's a high percentage of people of indigenous descent or ancestry in the area near the Amazon rainforest that crosses over between Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia. Here's a similar map. This is actually of indigenous language. This is the percent of the population speaking an indigenous language in Mexico from their 2005 census. It also reveals some interesting patterns. Here's a map of prevalent nationality, or non-Russian nationality, if you will, in Russia. So these are for some of the largest non-Russian nationality groups in Russia. And finally, these two maps show some of the challenges that we face in mapping international data, in particular areas that may be under dispute. So on the left, we have a map of the Russian population in Moldova, and if some of you are familiar with the area, there's a region known as Transnistria that is in dispute, and it's shown by the dotted line there, and you can see a stark difference in the Russian population on either side of that line. In this case, the area actually conducted their own census, so we were able to combine data from the Transnistrian census with data from the Moldovan census. On the right, we have the state of Israel along with areas that are in dispute, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, again shown by dashed lines. And in all cases, for any maps that we publish, we tend to follow the State Department's official boundaries. And in these cases, I believe we're using their, the LISB, the LSIB, the Large Scale International Boundary Data Set. All right, so to wrap up, this page shows where you can find some of our interactive mapping tools. Not all of them are shown on this page. In fact, I'll try to do a demonstration here of one that's not shown here, but we have a number of them, and you can find them on our website at census.gov. In addition to thematic mapping tools, we also have some reference mapping tools. Some of you may be familiar with TigerWeb, which is an interface that allows you to display data that we have in our Tiger system. And what I'd like to show you to close is our international map viewer, which is not accessible from this particular page, but if I can bring up my web browser here. All right, hopefully you can see that. So I don't know how many in the audience are familiar with our international database, but we actually have a database where we have estimates and projections at the national level for all countries of the world. I think we're actually one of the few agencies that produce estimates and projections globally for all countries in the world. So from that database, you can access this map viewer that displays some of the data in that database. And in this case, we're looking at the 2018 population at the country level. There's a few other variables you can see here. This is the population growth rate, I believe 1 year from 2017 to 2018. We also have, life expectancy at birth for 2018 and the infant mortality rate for 2018. So this works pretty much like you would expect any sort of standard interactive map product to work. You can click and pan around, and you can zoom in and zoom out. And if you click on a country, it will display the data, the actual data value for whatever variable you have selected for the specific country that you've clicked on. So just a really quick and dirty demo of one of the several interactive map tools that we have, and just thought I'd highlight some of our international stuff because folks usually think of U.S. domestic data when they think of the U.S. Census Bureau, and a lot of folks aren't as familiar with some of our international products. So if any of you have an interest, hopefully you will take a look at some of the things that we have on our website, and that's all I had. So if you all have any questions, I think we have a little bit of time left. I'd be happy to do my best to answer.
Yeah, so I have, this is great, the international map, but my question is, what's the motivation to do international work rather than just to keep it strictly national? Is there something that, is it part of a vision for census that you have for the future?
Nope, sorry. Not bad.
Need 2 mics. Sure. So there are a number of motivating factors, I guess, so to speak, as to our international work. A lot of it is on a reimbursable basis. So there are other agencies who come to us and request international data. Some other countries actually come to us and request assistance for conducting their censuses, and usually they're nice enough to share their data with us. Another thing we do is we maintain an HIV/AIDS database, and that's part of, I believe, the President's PEPFAR. I forget exactly what it stands for, but the President's Plan for AIDS Relief. And as part of that, we need to have total population data for each country for a calculation of HIV and AIDS rates. So a lot of times some countries are data poor, if you will, and haven't had a census in quite a while. So in those cases, we use whatever data we can find, their most recent census data, and we create our own estimates and projections of the population for those countries, and sometimes at subnational level for smaller geographies within each country, for use in our own analysis for our global population programs. Also, I should probably also mention that some agencies also come to us for population data for humanitarian assistance and for disaster relief. So that's another important facet of the international work that we do.
Hi, quick question related to mapping other areas that may be data poor. Is there any external assistance that the Census Bureau kind of provides going into these areas, working with local census units, particularly in areas of conflict? You briefly mentioned Moldova and Israel and the West Bank. Are there any kind of ways that the Census Bureau works directly with areas that can be, I don't want to say tricky to map, but it's the word I'm using at 9 a.m. in the morning.
She stole my question, but it's okay.
Sure. So as I kind of alluded to, that work is mostly done on an as requested basis. So the onus is on usually the country's national statistical agency to come to us and say, hey, we need a little help here. And in those cases, when we're able, we do go in and try to assist them to the extent that we can. And that can be in the form of, sometimes folks actually will come to our headquarters in Suitland and participate in workshops there. And sometimes we'll actually send folks over to the country. So that may come in the form of technical assistance and capacity building, and we also have software that we train folks on and can provide to aid in census taking from the data collection side all the way to the dissemination side. So there are a number of activities that that our staff participates in helping other countries out that need our help. Does that answer your question?
Anybody else? A couple of minutes for more questions if you want to ask another question. Yes. Get my sprint on here.
Actually, that just made me wonder if y'all provide similar technical assistance within the U.S. as well for municipalities or administrative regions that want more accurate small area numbers between the intercensal, between the years ending in 0, similar to the way you do for other countries, or if that's, yeah.
Just going to quickly show you guys our international page. So if you go under topics here to population, one of the items here, if I can read, is international. So there's much more information about our international programs on this page, including, as you can see here, our capacity building and technical assistance programs. So, but as far as U.S. side, it's kind of our job to count everyone, right? So that's our mission. So there's really no one for us to help. We actually look for folks to help us make sure that we get everyone counted. For years that don't end in 0, we have official population estimates down to the city and town level that are largely based on administrative records. So we know how many folks we counted in the last census. We get birth and death data from every county. We also get IRS tax return data that allow us to estimate migration. So if you file your taxes in a different county than you did previous year, we know you moved. So essentially at the county level, we take the number that we counted at the last census, we add the number of people who've been born, we take away the number of people who died, and we add the number of people who moved in, and we take out the people who moved out. So I think our numbers are probably the most robust numbers there are. So there are some states that kind of have their own administrative records databases and have their own numbers. But as far as nationally, our numbers are pretty good. That's for total population, and we also, as I mentioned, do housing unit estimates, and that includes some modeling, particularly for international migration, because we don't always know when people leave the country. But we also have American Community Survey estimates for characteristics of the population, and those numbers actually go down to lower levels of geography. Obviously, they're based on a sample, so there's confidence intervals associated with those numbers. But for, I believe, at least the county level and up, maybe the city and town level also, those estimates are controlled to our official total population estimates. Did that answer your question?
Maybe one more.
All right. So on the interactive map that you were showing, I'm just curious as to how you calculated or how you're doing the calculation for the ranges. You have a lot of different variables and things like that. So are you using Jenks, or are you preparing, and what kind of work do you do to get that proper?
All right, so the international map viewer that I showed, I believe that's what your question was about. The data are from our international database, which you can find here, and I actually didn't show how to navigate to the map viewer, so you you've given me an opportunity to do that. But if you go here to the international database, there's a link that says click here for map interface. So all of the data are actually from this database. I don't work on this database myself, so I can't really give you a detailed answer. But there are a number of links here that will give you the methodology and the metadata behind the numbers that are in the database, which are the numbers that are on the map. Thank you.